For small island developing states, these negotiations are existential, and we cannot afford to leave any stone or barrier unturned. The success of this COP depends on our determining the new collective quantified goals. These goals are not merely a climate investment target. They are about enabling us, the most vulnerable, to have easy access to the long-term resources and financing necessary to address the impacts of climate change that we are experiencing now and will increasingly experience into the future. I express my deep concern over the dilution of the special circumstances of SIDS through the introduction of new language and additional references which are inconsistent with the foundations laid in Rio and the principles of the Paris Agreement. A COP29 package must ensure that the 1.5 target remains within reach, accompanied by a mitigation outcome that facilitates just transition to the fossil fuel-free future we all need. Adaptation continues to be an essential element for island states. We must meet the global goal on adaptation, while recognizing that loss and damage is an issue for today, not tomorrow. We are the blue planet. Ocean is an essential part of our climate and must be formally addressed as such. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. It is now my pleasure to welcome Mr. Norbu Wangchuk, Director General of South Asia Cooperative Environment Program. Sir, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as the Director General of the South Asia Cooperative Environment Program, SACEP, I'm honored to represent South Asia region at COP29 at a critical time for our planet. South Asia is one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change. Some even believe that South Asia will be the #1 casualty of climate change. The risks of climate change are no longer about the future of our children. It is a daily fight for our lives and livelihood. Underscoring the critical need for urgent action in the region, the ADB recently highlighted that the global fight against climate change could be won or lost in South Asia and the Pacific region. Mr. President, we are running out of time. The tipping threshold is dangerously close. In South Asia, the unprecedented glacial melts in the Hindu Kush mountains must be addressed with urgency. The risk of low-lying regions being submerged is imminent without immediate and decisive climate actions. As a vulnerable region, we welcome the progress made on the Loss and Damage Fund. This fund is not just a financial mechanism. It is a lifeline to provide critical and urgent support to the most vulnerable communities, helping them recover and rebuild in the face of climate disasters. SACEP stands ready to lead and facilitate regional collaboration for a climate-resilient South Asia. But our efforts must be matched with global solidarity and commitment. The challenges we face are immense, but so is our resolve. Today, we must act boldly, decisively, and with unwavering determination to safeguard the future of our region and our planet. Let us rise to this challenge because the cost of inaction is far too great. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. It is now my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Dr. Salim Mohammed Al-Malik, Director General of the Islamic Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. Sir, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I will deliver my speech in Arabic. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
In the name of Allah, most compassionate, most merciful, peace and blessings be upon you. I would like to extend my appreciation and thanks to the Republic of Azerbaijan for the gracious hospitality they have extended to the world to meet and reach a consensus. Now that we are here at this high-level meeting, the whole world is watching in a very precious health. As the Prophet said, the parable of the believers in their affection, mercy, and compassion for each other is that of a body. When any limb aches, the whole body reacts with sleeplessness and fever. Humanity's will and interest are all intertwined, which leads me to my second point. It is essential for us to use equality-based approaches if we truly want to survive as a world. Let us maintain equity in financial distribution as per our duty to conserve the environment and the climate. It is also important to exchange success stories to ensure practicality and innovation. Let us be all generous in this regard, and let us all remember that we are all in the same boat, and that any selfish act of narrow interest will be a threat to the whole boat. I present these two ideas to you, and I wish you the best of luck in this COP in a very harsh environment. And once again, I'd like to thank Azerbaijan, and peace and blessings be upon you all.
Thank you very much, sir. It is now my pleasure to welcome Mrs. Alenka Smerkolji, Secretary General of the Permanent Secretariat of the Alpine Convention. Madam, you have the floor.
We only need to overcome national borders, but also sectoral ones. With climate action, it is not about deciding between mitigation and adaptation. It is about accelerating both. Furthermore, we can't deal with climate change as if it were an isolated crisis. It is interconnected with biodiversity loss, land degradation, and people's well-being. The need to reinforce synergies between the three Rio Conventions was indeed one of the main messages of the recent COP16 of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And here, mountain environments can play a role as pilot areas. Within the Alpine Convention, we have 33 years of experience in cross-border cooperation and cross-sectoral cooperation at regional level. We try to work to protect and sustainably develop the European Alps. This treaty was signed because mountains deserve special attention. Mountains are hotspots of biodiversity, providers of clean water for billions of people worldwide. Yet, they are among the first victims of climate change. The expert dialogue on mountains and climate change convened by the SAPSTA chair last June was an important landmark at the UNFCCC processes. I hope that such opportunities for exchange will be provided again and again in the future, and might be extended to the CBD and other processes. Next year, mountains will particularly be in the spotlight since the United Nations General Assembly declared 2025 the International Year of Glaciers Preservation. Glaciers are emblematic sentinels of climate change. Let us do what we can to halt their melting. We know the science. We also know that our actions are currently far away from what it is necessary. And I call for all present to grasp the emergency of our situation and to be bold and ambitious in their actions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam. So now, distinguished delegate, ladies and gentlemen, I would like now to invite the representatives from civil society organizations to address the conference. It is my pleasure then to welcome Mr. Andrew Wilson on behalf of business and industry NGOs. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Excellencies, my simple message today on behalf of the global business community is this. COP29 must deliver an ambitious and comprehensive new collective quantified goal on climate finance. A goal that is true to the intent of the historic UAE consensus, a goal capable of bridging the growing climate finance gap in the developing world, and a goal that gives all countries the confidence and impetus to submit significantly enhanced national climate action plans in 2025. That new goal must without doubt incorporate a strong public finance element, including the provision of additional grant finance and concessional finance from all countries with the resources to do so. But from a business perspective, we also see a clear need and an opportunity for the NCQG to play a catalytic role in unlocking the trillions in private finance that will be needed to secure a low-carbon and resilient future by establishing an unequivocal political commitment to address prevailing barriers to the deployment of climate finance from private sources, not least the unintended impacts of macro-prudential regulation on climate finance flows to developing economies. In short, we need a deal that is truly capable of mobilizing the large-scale investments needed to put the fine words of the UAE consensus into action. Delaying, deferring, or delivering the bare minimum in Baku is quite simply not an option. As new research published by the International Chamber of Commerce shows, climate-related extreme weather events cost the global economy $2 trillion over the past decade. To put it another way, climate change is a today problem, and the costs of inaction are already being felt acutely across the real economy in the here and now. Excellencies, delivering a comprehensive NCQG will be an extraordinary achievement for multilateral negotiation, and it is in your grasp. Please seize this opportunity to make the promise of ambitious climate action a real reality, and in doing so, give us all help for the future. Thank you.
The bubble that this space has become in the recent years, completely disconnected from the real world and the real people. You might think that the severe limitations being placed in these halls on civil society will silence us. So you can go uncontested as you serve the rich and the powerful. You cannot avoid us. You cannot avoid us. You cannot escape accountability. We came here knowing that COP29 was not going to be an easy one. But the kind of bad faith tactics we have seen from developed countries goes beyond shameful. It is disgraceful. Please, don't be mistaken. We see very clearly the age of old colonial strategy of divide and rule that you are trying to deploy. In the face of these disgraceful attempts, we urge developing countries of the Global South to stand united with courage and stand up for the rights of civil society. If the Global North has any intentions of confronting the legacy of historic injustices, it can start by paying up. The Global North must provide trillions of dollars in public grants-based finance to developing countries to pay up the debt of years of climate injustice. The repayment is essential to cover the escalating cost of climate impacts, loss and damage, adaptation and just transition. We will not accept private investment or non-concessional loans as substitutes for this commitment, as they only increase the burden on poorer nations. There cannot be climate justice without gender justice and human rights. Ceasefire now. Defund genocide.
Thank you, sir. Now it is my pleasure to thank you. Thank you. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Mrs. Rachita Gupta of Demand Climate Justice Now on behalf of environmental NGOs. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Rachita Gupta and I'm speaking on behalf of ENGO DCJ. I voluntarily declare that I have no ties with fossil fuel industries or other emission-intensive industries and no conflict of interest. We know there are nearly 1,800 fossil fuel lobbyists at COP29. Every year, half my country suffers from devastating heat waves, while the other half is ravaged by floods. And the very criminals who have polluted our world, my home, are now here to pollute these stocks supported by global north countries. And they have been doing it for nearly 30 years. We and our communities are being destroyed by wildfires, floods, typhoon, drought, climate crisis-induced destruction and devastation. And we are not the ones responsible for it. It is you rich countries and your fossil fuel buddies. Your hunger and greed have looted our lands, our water, our forests, and with it, our very future. We are here for a finance COP, and it is increasingly turning into a bankrupt COP as you developed countries continue to deny your historical responsibility. We demand an ambitious NCQG of $5 trillion USD per year as new public, grants-based and non-debt creating climate finance for mitigation, adaptation and loss and damage. You can't lie to us that you don't have the money. You provide $1 trillion USD in subsidies to fossil fuel companies and $1 trillion USD to your militaries. You would rather fund war, conflict and genocide than climate action. You want us to instead sell our lands and resources as carbon markets to continue your imperialism and colonialism. Now I call on our governments to stand up, stand strong against the dirty tactics of the rich countries. You are here representing millions of people back home. A bad deal, the one that shifts the burden to global south countries or dilutes the global north's obligations, is worse than no deal at all. Don't let global north governments derail this process and sow division. Our power lies in our solidarity. We simply cannot afford another shameful and empty outcome. We are asking for our right to exist. Defund genocide, fund climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Mrs. Betty Chinyamunyamu on behalf of farmers and agriculture NGOs. Madam, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my name is Betty Chinyamunyamu, CEO of the National Smallholder Farmers Association of Malawi, speaking here today on behalf of the UNCCC Farmers Constituency. In Malawi and across the globe, farmers are enduring the relentless impacts of climate change. Extreme weather patterns, prolonged droughts, erratic rainfall, and frequent floods are destroying not just our crops and livestock, but our entire livelihoods and future. We therefore urgently call for climate action that prioritizes the needs and solutions of farmers and is supported by adequate means of implementation. Access to land and water, availability of knowledge and information, adoption of locally appropriate technologies are not luxuries, they are necessities. Food security must remain at the heart of climate policies, and farmers' rights must be at the core of proposed solutions, including the development of carbon markets. We also seek greater inclusion of farmers in UNFCCC processes and a strong role for us in the implementation of COP decisions. A record of climate-related losses and damages between 2008 and 2018, our constituency has not been included in the loss and damage fund governance. This needs to change. Let us work together to cultivate a future where farmers thrive, agriculture and food systems endure, and no one is left behind. The soil beneath our feet may be humble, but it holds the promise of life, resilience and hope, not just for farmers, but for everyone. Thank you.
Organizations. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, we stand here as voices from the 7 socio-cultural regions of the world, guardians of all ecosystems for millennia. Climate change is not a distant threat, it is a present reality that endangers our homes, cultures and survival. All parties must reaffirm their commitment to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, our right to self-determination, including free, prior and informed consent. These are not just principles, these are essential to ensuring our survival and dignity. The NCQG must be guided by our perspectives and voices in its design and implementation, with a focus on ensuring direct and the wisdom we bring are integral to the global response to climate change. By fully including us in all decision-making processes, you help secure humanity's most valuable resources for resilience. Finally, we call on all parties to recommit to the 1.5 target, phasing out fossil fuels and transitioning to sustainable systems that embody the human right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment. Our leadership, underpinned by our knowledge systems, offer hope and solutions in this collective fight for survival. Honourable delegates, let COP29 be remembered as a turning point where our voices were not only heard but acted upon. Together we can chart a path to a just, equitable and resilient future for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. It is now a pleasure to welcome Mrs. Marjorie Kaufman on behalf of local government and municipal authorities. Madam, you have the floor.
I will speak Portuguese. Boa tarde, Presidente.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and especially it is an honor to speak to you today on behalf of the state of the Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, ICLE and LGMA. In May 2024, the state of Rio Grande do Sul suffered the worst climate disaster in its history, a flood that affected 95% of its municipalities. We know that many cities and regions around the world are facing these climate emergency realities almost every year. It is crucial that disaster prevention and response efforts are coordinated between the national and subnational levels with more flexible resource flows for extreme events. Our climate action plan, with the support of ICLE, is being developed with and for the 497 municipalities that make up the state of Rio Grande do Sul. The CHAMP initiative has formulated an interesting model, but for implementation we need financial and technical support. We welcome the inclusion of the recognition of climate federalism and the CHAMP initiative as a tool to implement the new Brazilian NDC. For COP29 in Baku, hundreds of cities and regions under the LGMA Constituency Assembly have proposed 3 demands. Number 1, accelerate multi-level action. Number 2, finance urbanization. And number 3, integrate climate action with sustainability. We need climate finance that focuses on grants, not loans, so that all levels of government can have a just transition. and we need to build synergies between mitigation, adaptation, and biodiversity to create a healthier planet. We must also ensure that Baku leaves a concrete legacy. The Ajami calls for the negotiated outcomes of COP29 to initiate a process in Baku to seize opportunities for sustainable and resilient urbanization, for climate action to be presented and agreed upon at COP30 in Belém. Only through multi-level effort will we be able to mitigate the impacts of climate change and ensure a safer and more sustainable future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Gaston Meskens on behalf of research and independent NGOs. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak at this high-level segment. My name is Gaston Meskens from Ghent University in Belgium, and I'm speaking on behalf of the research and independent NGOs. Next year, we will be 10 years beyond the coming into being of the Paris Agreement. While progress is made, there remain multiple open issues. And yet we understand that effective climate policies are essential to maintaining the vitality and resilience of our planet. We, as the global research community, continue to emphasize the need to take into account the multiple technical and social factors that drive or inhibit the transition. Collective knowledge for action is not the sum of independent bits and pieces. It comes into being through inclusive, reflective dialogue, supported by indigenous and local knowledge, as well as by input from the natural, physical, and social sciences, and by technologists working in concert with the humanities. In that sense, the global community of researchers should be viewed as a vital resource in supporting the elaboration of actionable recommendations, and it can serve as a resource for the implementation of policy decisions. We need to find better ways to engage current researchers and practitioners in sharing their knowledge, helping others to improve their capacities, and in helping people to understand new knowledge and technologies. Bridging the divide between ambitious goals and current capabilities is essential, especially in terms of capacity building, knowledge sharing, and technology transfer. Last but not least, we cannot look away from the multiple conflicts that concern the global community today. They not only threaten the vulnerable and destroy vital infrastructure, but they also pose challenges to reaching negotiated agreements and to achieving Paris Agreement targets. Also, in the interest of effectively addressing the complex problem of climate change, we urge parties to seek peace and unity today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It is now my pleasure to welcome Mrs. Joy Hernandez on behalf of trade union NGOs. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm from the International Trade Union Confederation Asia Pacific, and I speak on behalf of trade unions worldwide. We defend the rights and livelihoods of our nearly 200 million members. I declare that I have no conflict of interest with the fossil fuel industry. Workers are on the front line of the climate crisis, from the factory floors to open fields, from cities to remote communities. Workers face rising temperatures, air pollution, floods, droughts, and wildfires that threaten their lives and livelihoods. According to the International Labour Organization, 70% of workers worldwide, amounting to 2.4 billion people, are at risk from climate-related health hazards. This burden falls disproportionately on workers in the Global South, in conflict zones, and in vulnerable sectors like care work and the informal labor, where women are overrepresented. Yet, the voice of workers and their organizations are sidelined from crucial discussion.
Thank you very much, Madam. It is now my pleasure to welcome Mrs. Mwanahamisi Singano on behalf of the Women and Gender constituency. Madam, you have the floor.
Climate crisis, biodiversity loss, patriarchy continue to contribute to gender injustices, depriving women, children of their rights, their livelihood, and in some cases, their lives. These crises have perpetuated inequality and pushed millions in abject poverty. The Lima Work Programme on Gender, established in COP29, marked a critical step in advancing gender justice within the global climate framework. It aimed to challenge the persistent gender imbalances in the global climate decision-making and ensure gender consideration are woven into every facet of climate policy and in action. At COP29, Women and Gender expect parties to agree on an ambitious work program with a concrete action beyond the rhetorics. This decision must ensure that the voices, experience, and the leadership of women in all their diversities, particularly indigenous women, rural and frontline community women, are at the heart of climate governance. The work program we expect should deliver gender justice transition based on the care of people and planet towards gender just climate future, respecting intersectionality and diversity as the key to gender inequality is inevitable. President, for far too long, feminists have demanded gender just responsive climate finance to deliver effective and gender just action. The NCQG decision should ensure critical access to finance, to locally led and right-based climate action, often delivered and led by women and girls. Climate finance that isn't gender responsive or human right-based is simply ineffective. COP29 must deliver new, additional, predictable, grant-based and ambitious climate finance at scale and quality that is needed to address the urgency and the need of the people and the communities in developing countries. COP29 needs to ensure Paris Agreement goals can be achieved and work program on gender is implemented. Defund genocide, climate justice now. There will be no climate justice without human rights and gender justice. Thank you.
Distinguished delegates, my name is Adela Tui, a Maya Karchikel indigenous woman from